Welcome to the first episode of the Scale Model World podcast. I'm David Howell, your co-host with none other than Wayne Green of the World of Wayne.
Hello.
In this new podcast series, the aim is to explore how, I guess, every aspect of the model that we all love. That's model making in all of its forms. We'll, of course, cover big scale models and the part work world, but also plastic kits and also allied industries and fields that all link to our hobby. The aim of this podcast series is to include insights and help everyone that is really passionate about the same hobby as we are. We'll have regular guests and also cast our net a little bit wider to talk to people from businesses and other areas that support model making and give us their insights into maybe specialized model making industries such as film and architecture and everything in between. We also want to encourage you to get in touch. If you have any questions or queries, we may be able to help with them. So please do get in touch with us. You can get in touch with Wayne or I. There's email addresses all over our websites. So please do, if you have a query or a question, anything that you think maybe would be maybe an interesting point to maybe bring up on a future episode, then please do get in touch, because this podcast is absolutely for you guys. It's we want to create a community around these podcasts. So please do to get in touch with anything that you feel we could help you with. But before we sort of go on, I think it's probably good to maybe introduce ourselves. I guess there will be people out there who just know who Wayne is and who I am. So maybe I'll come to you first, Wayne. So World of Wayne. I think a lot of people know you from that. But can we kind of maybe go back a little bit? Where did that come from? How did you get started with World of Wayne, and maybe also your sort of passion for model making?
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, I've been model making since I was a kid, and then had a break for probably about 30 years. I was one of these people
Andy,
that picked up my tools again
Andy.
when I was an adult, sort of thing. And then actually building something on a channel or making a YouTube channel of my hobby was something that I never ever thought of in a million years. That was actually Mrs. World of Wayne who came up with that idea.
Right.
And believe me, the World of Wayne channel is what it sounds. It was supposed to be a channel about my world and things I get up to, whether it be visiting locations, building something, opening one of these gift boxes, sort of thing.
Also, like a blog then, really. So it was never intended to be the channel it is now. It was literally just like a personalized blog.
Yeah, well, funny you should say that, because actually the first reiteration of it was the World of Wayne blogging site, which was I think it was on the Blogger network. It's
Good
not
old
there anymore.
Blogger.
And I used to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
a written blogger, and I had quite a few subscribers on that, But for me, it was a release. It was an outlet for me to vent if I wanted to, and from there it just naturally progressed to doing video. And believe me, some of the videos that I first started with, I was teaching people origami. I mean, it was all sorts of really basic things. And it wasn't until I started the Millennium Falcon from D'Agostini that I thought, hello, we've got some potential here. And originally, when I was doing the Millennium Falcon, I was doing it on live streams. Live streams was something that
Every single
happened
episode.
kind of
Wow.
first. Yeah, pretty much. And then I decided, okay, we can actually, if anyone watches the World of Wayne channel, you know how many mistakes I make. I can actually minimize that by making edited content, and that's where the actual channel started to pick up from. So, and then it's just come from strength to strength, because I mean, I'm a big fan of pop culture, movies, TVs, everything like that. So when all of this stuff started to come in, I was like, I need that. I need that one. I need that one. And it was like a collection for me. So it's that's where I've come from, and that's where I am today.
It's interesting, isn't it, that you talk about pop culture. I think we're both 80s fanboys. I think we're more or less the same age. I think so. 80s was kind of our decade, and you could argue that was a fantastic decade for film and music, particularly film and TV. Amazing stuff. I think
I think definitely all the best series came out in the 80s.
Yeah, apologies to anyone that's any younger or older, but hey guys, 80s is the 80s. That's kind of what we're up for.
But I did mention it to my viewers before, that if it wasn't for the 80s, I wouldn't have known the shows from the 60s, like Land of the Giants and Time Tunnel, because they started to repeat them on like the Sky Network during the 80s. So it's like, oh wow, so opened a whole new world. I think it was the advent of TV which opened all of this stuff up to us.
Yes, I think that's right. I think that it's just that thing that has come back, I think, because everything does eventually, I guess, and that's kind of how I got back into it. Because I did model making again when I was younger, absolutely, but it was my passion when I was a child. 30 years later, maybe even longer, if I did the maths correctly, it was what it was looking around for something else to do. I mean, I'm a journalist and tech writer. That's my business. That's what I do. I've been doing that for decades.
Mhm.
But I was looking around for something else. I guess something to literally get me away from the screens, get me away from the keyboard, just for something else that wasn't sort of tech related per se. Um, and I thought, well, the only thing I was really passionate about when I was younger was model making. So let's get back into that. Let's do that.
Mm.
Because I've been away for decades. But when I started to look at the industry again and what it had moved on ridiculously from when I was doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally, it was for me when I was 12 years old in my bedroom. It was like tea tray and shoebox for my tools, and that was it.
Mm.
These days, it's bonkers. I mean, I find a new tool, some new process every day when I'm looking at model making websites. So the industry, as a thing and a hobby, has got so diverse. It kind of made my head spin to begin with. Where do you start? Where do you begin?
Yeah, no, no, definitely. And I'll tell you what, the amount I'm still learning today. I mean, it's not
Oh
like
yeah,
I'm no,
absolutely.
I'm by nowhere near a professional. I still consider myself an amateur,
Yeah,
but that's
yeah.
the fun of this. You're getting new skills, everything you do.
Practice,
That's why
practice.
I love
That's
it.
what it's
Oh yeah,
about.
definitely.
Practice, practice. I mean, I look back at when I was younger, and it's absolutely right. The skills I guess I have now are infinitely better than when I was younger. Obviously, of course, and
Mm.
you kind of carry on. Um, but of course, my writing business is a small business. I'm self-employed, so again,
Yeah.
I could not resist it. Looking at is there a business opportunity as well? I couldn't resist it. I tried. I said, no, I'm just going to do this as a hobby, but I could resist it because I saw business opportunities all over the place,
Yeah.
and that's how sort of Tyrell Models came about, and that's why it's a store which I started about a year ago. It's only been a year, which is amazing. It's done
Wow.
so well in a year. I couldn't resist. I had to do something businessy with that because I guess I'm just too entrepreneurial. But that's been an interesting connection as well, to connect a hobby with the business as well for me. So yeah, the two run sort of parallel, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
For me. But that's kind of where we are, isn't it? It's a hobby I feel which is infinite. Whatever you're
Uh-huh.
interested in, whatever subject, you can get into this kind of hobby, fairly easily. Doesn't matter what it is, whatever
Mm.
subject you feel that is strong for you. There are models out there you can build. Um, I think it's just that thing about, are you a maker or aren't you? Is that something you want to get into or you don't? Um,
Yeah.
and that's going to be, I think, a conversation maybe on an episode later on. I think where you kind of decide what kind of maker are you? Are you a part worker? Are you a plastic modeler? Are you something in between?
But I tell you what, the whole part work, it's exploded, I reckon, in the last 3 years, especially when the pandemic hit. That's
Indeed.
brought a lot of peoples that probably weren't normal, kit modelers that
Yeah, yeah,
painted,
yeah,
airbrush,
yeah.
primed, and all that. They brought that into the hobby because a lot of that's done for you. And it's now an assembling thing as well, which I think is great because it makes the community a lot bigger than it was. And you are learning techniques, believe it or not, even with part work models that you would probably learn on a kit model as well. So it's I just think it's a great time to be alive if you are a part work model builder.
Well, I think it's one of those, isn't it? I think again, I think we have an episode in the future where we're going to talk about kind of that in detail. Getting into the hobby, to begin with, and what you also sort of pay attention to, what to think about, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But I kind of did want to ask you, I guess some sort of basic questions. But before we do that, I kind of wanted to have a look at, I guess, what's happening in sort of model making world and part work world. Um,
Yeah.
because it does seem to me that we are, I guess, entering the next phase. It's been a bit quiet, I believe.
Hmm.
There's been not a great deal sort of announced and floating about. At least not as many as I used to perceive it to be. So when you got to the new year, and there was like an avalanche of these things usually,
Yeah.
and there kind of hasn't been that. I think the big companies are kind of picking and choosing what they want to release. So for you, when you survey the landscape, what for you are the sort of nuggets? What's kind of coming, which is kind of sweating your appetite?
Well, just going to what you said about the release date. Historically, most of the models used to come out in January, and they used to
Yeah,
advertise them over
yeah,
the Christmas period. I remember seeing them on TV,
yeah,
and
indeed.
then you'd have these big releases in January. And that's not just part work models; that's things like the art of fishing. I remember that the collection and stuff like that.
Yes, indeed.
Always used to come on in January. It's like a fresh thing,
Yeah.
and people would get that. But it seems like it's moved to April now because
Hmm.
everything that's starting to be announced now is around about this sort of time. And it's compared to how we were like 4 or 5 years ago, where there was only like 3 or 4 things on the market,
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
on the part work side. It's gone through the roof, absolutely through. And it's like a massive explosion, so much so that I'm starting to worry that, is there too many things out there that are
Oh,
coming?
really?
And this is
Oh,
not yeah, and not just
right.
part works. I mean, I had the opportunity to go and see Airfix last year,
Yes, indeed.
for and saw how their Spitfire Mark 9 was created and stuff, and seeing that, and that was all based in the UK, so that was being made in the UK
Yep. Hmm.
for and to see how that's done, and how easy it is, but then how I used to think it was I thought they could whip these things like 500 a second or something coming out, but no, no,
Yes,
no. These
yes.
injection moldings, they take time to do each individual kit,
Yep, yep.
which I thought was pretty amazing. And then they've got a whole lineup of things coming as well. And that's just, I don't know about the other like kit model companies like Revell and stuff like that, but just looking at the part work world and the Airfix world, it's like something's exploded. And I do wonder, when the pandemic hit and a lot of people came back to the hobby, if the planning started then and it's only just taken till now to put it into realization and production sort of thing.
I think you could argue that, couldn't you? I think you
Yeah,
could argue that for the part workers, of course. I mean, you often mention on your channel that it's the time taken to get the licenses, isn't it?
yeah,
That's the time. But if you think what it takes in investment and time to put a part work together, not just the design or the instructions, etc., all of it, it's mind boggling, and you can kind of
yeah,
see why it takes so long. So I'm imagining they're doing a lot of these in parallel, and of course then they all hit at the same time.
yeah,
Which for me is good and bad. It's good that we have a choice, but bad if you want. I quite fancy three of those, but the
yeah.
bank balance won't stretch to three. So it's which one do I really want out of that three? And that's kind of really that's a hard decision. It really is.
I'll tell you what, I definitely think we should get someone from the part work world
Oh yeah,
onto that
yeah,
to
absolutely,
explain the procedure and the process, because
absolutely.
believe me, I haven't got a clue how it works.
I have an inkling because I have done research,
Mhm.
etc. Because when I was designing the workstation, a lot of the
Yeah,
techniques are the same. So it's sourcing materials, manufacturing in the Far East, all the rest of it. So I have a sort of a vague idea of the process that all that goes through, that kind of thing. But
yeah.
for the plastic modeling guys, you're right. All the catalogs seem to come out at the same time, and then it's literally it's a switch up. It's like what do you want first, guys? Yeah, big scale models, small scale models. Well, mentioning big scale models, I was looking at ICM's the Tahi US heavy helicopter,
Yeah.
new one in 1/35th scale. This thing's 77 centimeters long when it's finished. That's a scale model at 1/35th scale. It's bonkers, this thing. It's crazy.
Wow.
I mean, I wouldn't even. I'd like to build something like that, but I've nowhere to display it. So what's the point? But it's huge. This model. Whether it's getting bigger or simply it's because of the scale, it's 1/35th. So they have to do that. And again, it's an interesting
Yeah.
conversation that all part works of 1/8. Of course, that's an interesting conversation as well for the future. I think how they
Yeah.
kind of decided that that was the ideal scale for these things. I think that's an interesting conversation for one of the guys from the companies, which we will have someone on as a guest in future episodes.
Definitely. Definitely.
Now, what I also wanted to ask you, I think it'd be good. Again, I'd like to reiterate to everyone listening, if you do have any questions or queries, do come back to us with those. But there's a kind of few things I think we could sort of start off with. I think you've already touched on why part works are so popular. I think lockdowns and I think the pandemic has and certainly an influence there. Absolutely. But of course, I mean, there must be very few people who've built so many part works than you. I mean, surely, you can stretch that back all the way back to the early days almost of the first ones. Um,
Yeah.
so why do you think they're so popular? Is it just a simple build? Is it because the subject matter is so varied? Do you have a feel for why part work model making has become so popular?
I touched on it earlier. I do think
Yeah,
it's because it brings a lot more people into the hobby, which don't have to require painting, and because that's a side of it that if you're not very good at, it's
yeah,
gonna deter you away from building a model. So
indeed.
having a part word model where everything's there and you're just assembling it, I'm gonna use the word. It does make things simpler, but some of these part word models, I'm ripping my hair out about how hard these are,
Simple's not
especially
the
if
right
you're
word.
doing
Yeah,
things like the Titanic, or you've done the Zero Fighter, and some of the things are really difficult on there. But again, you're learning new skills. But by bringing the people in and seeing that you can do this, and it covers a vast array of skill sets from the amateur builder to an expert builder, I think that's why it suddenly kicked off. And I think that's not just I think that's primarily just for the part work well rather than kit models. But that's probably why there's such a growth. And as I said, if you see what's now available and what's coming soon in the part work world, it mirrors it, because there must be such a big market out there for it.
Absolutely right. There would not be as many if there wasn't a marketplace for it. Clearly,
Yeah,
I would argue that some of the part works we have seen, I don't understand the market place for it, and I'm pointing at Eddie Starbot there.
yeah,
I just don't understand that. I just don't, because at the time I think the company had a choice. They had that one or something more interesting. I can't remember
yeah.
what it was. It might have been the Hogwarts Express, or it might have been something else. But I thought, why have you picked that?
Both those trials came out at the same time. The Eddie
Yeah,
Stobart and Hogwarts Express trials came out at the same time.
yeah. It's like, really, a truck? You'd rather go with that than something, really? But hey,
That was very localized as well, because people in the
yeah,
UK
yeah,
would know
yeah.
Eddie Stobart, but people overseas wouldn't have heard of it. So,
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's another issue, isn't it? It's interesting that the companies involved, all that they kind of used to be a little bit localized, and I suppose they are to a degree still, aren't they? Yeah, we have guys in Europe, for instance. What are they called? Is it IXOs? They're called
yeah,
IXO collection. Yeah, they're out of France, aren't
IXO.
they?
I think IXO's
IXO,
the
IXO.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Apologies for butchering your name if you're listening. Apologies for that. But again, they're quite localized, aren't they? To Central
yeah,
Europe. You can
mm,
obviously get these things, but it's difficult outside of your own country. So it is
yeah,
interesting what you get released in, say, the UK, and stuff you don't, which is all. I'm still waiting for a RoboCop, for instance. Please,
yeah.
please, send me do RoboCop, but whether it'll happen.
I'd be very interested in doing a RoboCop.
And me, yeah. I'm looking for a figure because I say I've done Iron Man. I'm looking for the next figure, and I'm quite fancying the new Optimus. Yeah, um,
Optimus, yeah.
yeah, I'm quite fancying that the film version. I quite like the design of that. If
Oh,
the
you see,
parts,
I prefer the G1 version.
yeah, you see, that's interesting. I don't. That's it. Kind of. I thought that's not for me because I didn't really buy into the series, whereas I really bought into the films. So
I
it's
haven't
weird.
even seen the films.
Wow, geez, get what are you doing? Go and see the films. They are just amazing. At least, yeah, from a design point of view, the actual Transformers themselves, just absolutely crazy. If they can do that in a model, wow, that's going
Yeah.
to be fiddly for a start. Some of that stuff's going to be very, very interesting to put together. But that'd be very,
Well, I mean,
very
there's
good.
a lot going on in that model. I've seen pictures of the model, and there's a
Yeah,
lot going on
yeah.
in it, and that's probably what turned me away from the films, because I've only seen the trailers for Transformers, and
Okay.
it
Yeah.
looked too close, too far. I couldn't really see what was going on in the trailers. I don't know if the
Right.
whole film's like that, but to mirror that in a model, looking at the model, it just looks too busy. The model does.
We will see.
That's my opinion.
Yes, we will see. I say first few parts, have a look at all of this, and just see what if it's actually going to be a goer or not.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's also a conversation. I think for something maybe something in the future.
Yeah.
Now, let's stay with Partworks for a second.
Uh-huh.
I think a lot of people that maybe want to get into that say, "Yeah, I fancy doing the Super Snake. Fancy doing that. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. You know, I love the film. It's brilliant. You know, I want to do that. But how do I begin? You know, is it something that literally anyone that has never done model making before can do? Is it true that I can literally put this together with nothing more than a screwdriver? Um,
Well, if you were to name any other model, you name the Super Snake there. That is probably the perfect place to start a part word model, because
oh
that
well,
isn't overly hard. hard. It's quite a it's an easy to put together to model. It hasn't got the detail that some of the other 1.8 cars and stuff have got,
Sure.
but it's got enough details to make it look really good. And it's probably one of the simpler builds to start with as well.
I'm with you.
And I think that if you are going to be going into the part work world and the part work model, you could do a lot worse than starting at something like that. The Cobra wasn't too bad either, to be honest
Okay.
with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you pick the Super Snake. Absolutely, off you go. I'm signed up, and yeah, they've handed on my credit card details for the next. How many parts is it? Is it a couple of years for this thing?
It's 12 packs, so you can
12
either have
packs.
it over, or you can get an accelerated starter with Agora models. But
Yes, indeed.
basically, you'll get a pack a month for 12 months, and if you've gone for the 24-month option, then you get a pack every other month.
I'm with you. Okay, so you've done that. It's all signed up and ready to go. Let's talk about tools. Let's talk about that. Is it really the case that you need a screwdriver and nothing else? Is that really the case?
Most of the time, definitely. I mean,
Mm,
most of these builds anyway provide a screwdriver, no matter what your
yes, they
manufacturer or
do.
distributor of
Mm,
these parts
mm.
are. I don't get on with them on account that my fingers are too fat. I can't hold the screwdrivers
Sausage
properly.
fingers.
As is, so I've got my own screwdriver, but they all tend to use PHO, Phillips head screwdriver 0,
Yeah,
as
indeed.
as the size they need. You definitely do need sprue cutters
Yep.
because a lot of these builds do have details which are on sprues, and you do need glue. Not a lot of part works use glue, but there are some things that you do need to glue in. They're like the three essentials of building a part work model. There are other things that you might need eventually, like a scalpel to cut tubing and stuff like that. But you'll be able to get on with just those three items, no problems.
See, that's a great access to the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Don't worry about not paints, brushes, airbrushes, none of that. You don't have to do any of that with these things. It is very very easy access, isn't it?
yeah.
I guess the other question, of course, is if that's actually the case, then that I need very few tools to put these things together. Again, it's great that you're onto this because you have kind of this encyclopedic knowledge and this experience of part working for years. Do
Yeah.
you feel the quality's improved? Do you feel
The,
it? Feel that they are much better than they used to be?
I don't think it's the quality that's improved. I think the quality's been standard, but the detail has
Hmm.
gone completely crazy compared to, as I said, an engine that we were creating when we first did Partworks to what you're getting now is like, how detailed do you get? You're talking individual brake pipes. You're talking
Yes.
individual nozzles behind the brake drums, the pipes in a brake drum, the springs in a brake drum. It's like, oh my god, this is so deep. All we need now is petrol. This thing will run. it's,
Yeah.
it's quite crazy. But no, the detail side of it has, and I think that's probably because market research and probably feedback that these companies have said that they do want as much detail as you could possibly get. And that's why we are putting lines in for things like, I keep mentioning brake lines that you're probably never going to see. That they
Yeah.
don't have any
Good.
use. They,
Good.
yes, they're not working, but
Good.
you know they're there. So it's like that's the detail that they're going to, and that's not just 1.8 car models. We're looking at the same thing now with some of these figurine models, the Optimus Prime that I've
Hmm.
started doing.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
can see that in there, especially with the light in the ships that we're
Yeah.
doing, like the
Indeed.
Titanic and the Bismarck. The amount of detail in that, it's going. I think that's where it's going. That we're going to be getting to a stage where we're going to see a lot more detail than we are now, especially the new reiteration of 1.8 vehicle cars that we're coming out with the remote controls now rather than having to push switches.
Yes, indeed.
Um,
Mhm.
we never had that before, and I mentioned that Agora models have got the Corvette Stingray coming out. That's got a remote control in it, and I thought that was the first model that we've had a remote control. But obviously, the Knight Rider model had one, but that's on a watch, so I don't count that. But
Oh, okay. Yeah.
definitely the remote controls are the way to go because I was mentioning before to you, Dave, you probably remember saying that how many of these 1.8 models that we've got, which are electrics, are you actually going to use? The fact of the
Mm.
matter is
Yep.
that if it's sitting on a shelf and you've got a remote control, you're more inclined to use it than having to go over to it,
Oh,
turn
yeah.
it
Yeah.
on, open a
Absolutely.
door, press a switch. As a matter of fact, the X-Wing that I built, one of the first ones above my head now, I've got the remote control in front of it and I'm always playing with it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I've seen people putting DeLoreans into coffee tables. for instance.
Oh yeah.
Because it's all enclosed. They run the power to just a standard power brick or something. It's all enclosed. It's all battery powered, and you can switch it on whenever you like. It's you can have the flux going. When you're watching Netflix or something. It's all built into a piece of furniture. Great idea.
But I did ask on my channel a great question, and I'm sure people who are listening to this podcast are going to be able to answer this for me because everyone's got a different opinion. At what point does a model become a toy?
Yes, that's that. I think that's on our forward planning list, isn't it? There's
Yes.
a whole podcast about that. I think, and we'll get a couple of guests on with maybe opposing views to give us
Mhm.
their idea of what that is. But it's interesting when you look at the top end, the finely detailed models which you can buy. Even those are being modded by certain companies. Even those you can increase the detail on. It's like how
Yeah.
far do you push this? But it's great that you feel that the your partworks they will go together. You haven't got to worry
Yeah.
that the doors are going to be wonky or the seals aren't going to fit. The
Mhm.
actual manufacturing, I think that's probably what I should have made me. When I meant about quality, I think what I mean is manufacturing. You aren't going
Yeah.
to have problems with that. You're not going to have to modify these things to fit them together.
Chances are, if you have problems with doors not fitting and stuff like that, you've done something wrong. nine times out of 10, something's gone wrong.
Yeah, it's probably not the manufacturing guys. Yeah, take it to
Yeah.
bits and start again. Something's on backwards. Or
Yeah.
my classic one is I sort of finish a stage and I've got a piece on the bench. I just completely missed the stage. It's like, how can I
Yeah.
miss a stage?
I've done that. On
What's that
the
about?
on the Ecto One, I put the internal bulkhead the wrong way round.
Wow.
And the thing's together now. I've got to take the whole thing apart
Take
to
it
turn the
apart. Yeah,
bulkhead round.
yeah.
I'm always
Because
making mistakes.
Because later on, isn't it? Because you get it
Yeah.
wrong on, I don't know, stage 4 or something. But until you get stage
Yeah.
15 or something, you absolutely need stage 4 to be right because it won't
Yeah.
fit. It will
No.
not fit. And it's really hard to backtrack, I find. Taking stuff to
But
bits.
that's another reason why I created the YouTube channel, because you get a lot of people actually chucking away the instructions and just watching
Yes.
my tutorials. Hence why if I make a mistake, I always keep them in the videos, because if I've made the mistake, someone else is going to make the mistake. So
Well, that's absolutely right.
Mhm.
Now, before we move on, I'd like to talk to you all about a company that I've been working with for the last 12 months, Agora Models, the home of big scale modeling. Agora Models has transformed the world of scale modeling since they launched, largely due to their company promise. Now, that company promise is designed to re-establish trust that once a new model has been launched, it will not stop production until every part of the kit has been produced. That's the Agora promise. Also, the Agora Advantage Club rewards customers, giving members early access to new models, but importantly, ensures the customer care experience is first class. Whether you want to build a museum quality car, iconic vehicles, or love sci fi and fantasy, there is a model in the Agora range ready for you. With exciting new models coming this year, including the first of the James Bond collection. If you've always wanted to build a model, Agora Models invites you to join a massive community of fellow big scale modelers. Visit agoramodels.com to discover their ever expanding range of museum quality models. I think what I also wanted to talk to you about is I guess what's coming next. So this is our inaugural episode. We've had a bit of a ramble on this one. We've covered a lot of topics. But I think for everyone listening, the future is kind of what you make of it, guys. Again, do come back to us with ideas and any kind of queries or questions. But we do have I guess a forward planning for lots of episodes into the future. That includes guests and also specific areas of model making, which I guess we want to explore. I think I've already mentioned certain industries like film, architectural, and also museums. We're going to explore that with ourselves and also with guests talking about those specific kinds of model making. So in the future, the Scale Model World podcast is really about you guys. It's about the audience. It's really your podcast. Do feel you can't get in touch with us. It's certainly not something that we want to produce in isolation. So please do come back to us with any ideas or any kind of suggestions you'd like for our podcast. In episode 2, we'll once again cover what's happening sort of in the model space, and also we'll have our first guest, which will be none other than Mike Lane himself, so the modding supremo, which I think many of you may have been introduced to Wayne's channel. Mike's been doing a sort of amazing job for I guess elevating the model space for our models for several years. So he will be a guest on the second episode of our podcast, which should be in a few weeks' time. So please do join us for the next episode, which you can find on all of your favourite podcasting services. Until next time, it's a goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Wayne.
Take care, everyone. See you later.